welcome to this sixth webinar of the Just4All MOOC. So this is a part of our webinar series, but it's also part of our massive open online course on the Just Transition and adult learning and education. So we're very, very happy that you're still with us. I can see some names that I've seen before, and I'm really happy that there is kind of a retention and kind of a history following our participants. So very, very glad to have you in today once again. So per usual, or if it's your time, per structure, how we're going to go on with the day is that we're going to give you a bit of an introduction on today's theme. And today's theme is awareness raising and campaigning for citizens and consumers on the topic of the just transition. So what we're going to do is that we will quickly go on some key points from the introductory presentations and material that we have in our massive open online course. We are going to provide you with some important links to how to follow our Moodle, how to follow the good practices that we have selected in the field, and also give you a bit of an insight on how we perceive awareness raising and campaigning in this very context. Then once we do that, we will have the open discussion of the day, which is going to be the majority of the time after the 10-minute introduction. And in that, I will present to you our three lovely panel speakers, Raffaela, Carla, and Stefan, as you can see them on your screen. More to come in a bit. Yeah, we will introduce them to you, and we're going to have a very fun discussion. At all times, you're free to use the chat. You're free to raise your hand and ask a question. We would recommend that you do not ad hoc open your mics, just to be sure that we do not get a lot of interruptions, audio interruptions. But of course, if you need to ask a question, just raise your hand and we will give you the line to voice your thoughts. And we actually very, very much want that. So if you feel like it, just jump in. So with that, I will say good morning to Raf, Clara, and Stefan, and ask you if you're ready to to start this webinar. Lovely. Okay, so let me start by sharing my screen. I will let you know that this is going to be the only PowerPoint presentation in this webinar. So do not be afraid that you know, it's only going to be people reading from PowerPoints. No, we really wanted to follow another kind of way in this webinar. So this is going to be the only one, and hopefully not boring at all. Let's see. Okay. Yes. Can you see it? Just a thumbs up. Yes. Good. So awareness raising for citizens and consumers for a just transition is our topic. As I already mentioned, this is part of our general Just4All MOOC, which has 8 modules covering various aspects of the just transition. We say that the duration of the full module is about 2 weeks long, but with that we mean the internal reflection on the concepts as well, and generally following the resources that we provide you. So each of these modules has one dedicated webinar in it. And for that, we have already completed 5. This is the 6th, and we have 2 remaining on the 3rd and the 4th week of February coming up. So as you can see, we have quite a spread. If you haven't followed the previous webinars, you can find them all on YouTube. And the first one is an introduction to lifelong learning and adult learning and education for just transition. We have a webinar on social innovation, empowering and engaging vulnerable groups, grassroots initiatives and community learning, just transition and competencies for the future, and of course, awareness raising actions and campaigns. And then after that, we will discuss strategic partnerships for just transition, and we will finish with gamification and other innovative methods to promote the just transition. So today, let's bring it up for this time. When we talk about awareness raising, we refer to the efforts that are aimed in informing and educating the public about specific issues. So in our context, our advocacy work and our awareness work is truly an educational path and an educational process. With the goal of influencing attitudes, behaviors, and policies. This is very important to understand, as we do not see awareness raising and campaigning, just like a smart slogan or a smart motto. It's much, much deeper than that, and it really reflects the positioning of each one of us and the message that we want to pass through. So we want to see these campaigns as ways to make people more conscious of issues that they might not be fully aware. This is why you see that we're talking both citizens and consumers, and this will be reflected in the panel discussions today, as we will be bringing forward issues of consumerism and how that connects to the just transition, but also relate to several elements of our life, like environmental sustainability, human rights, public health. And at the end of the day, we want to encourage people and ourselves to actually take action, whatever that might be and whatever resonates with our community. So in this model, we will try to see how awareness raising also differs from advocacy, especially advocacy from some key players that most of the times probably we're more aware of than smaller cases of smaller institutions or smaller organizations. And we see that we have two slightly different objectives that are the most important. First of all, awareness raising for us focuses on information dissemination and education and seeks to change some things, change perceptions, attitudes, or awareness levels. With advocacy, on the other hand, we have an aim to actively promote specific action or policy changes. So one is more on the general aspect of a perception, of an attitude, of an awareness level, while the other is more action-oriented. And the goal for advocacy most of the time is to influence decision makers and mobilize supporters of said decision makers to achieve tangible change. So this also affects not only the content, but also the ways and the methods that are needed. And this is why in this module, you will see that we will talk also significantly about tools. We will not touch on this introduction, because I want to leave that for our panel later on. But just so you know, in the original introductory presentation, you can also find the tools for awareness raising and campaigning. But in these methods, we have public media campaigns, cinema campaigns, social media, educational programs, events, exhibitions, whereas in advocacy, we have more of a direct interaction with the policymakers, the well-known lobbying, we have legal actions, coalition building, and then grassroots mobilization to achieve these supports in order to achieve those tangible change. So a very, very big part of awareness raising is also consumer education. And consumer education really, for us, in this context of the just transition, really informs the way that we get people interested also in the topic of the just transition, as the way that we consume is also the way that we act, and it's also the way that we engage with our surroundings in many levels. So consumer education empowers individuals to make informed choices that are consistent with their values, that protect and promote their rights as consumers, but also as citizens, and can contribute to wider societal goals. So it is our goal that in this form of public awareness raising, that consumer education is very, very key, because as we said, if we're not truly educated through the campaigns, through the awareness raising actions themselves, we can fall into some paths that are more dangerous, and paths of greenwashing, paths of tokenism, just mentioning things for the sake of mentioning them. But if we have at all times consumer education and citizenship education in the back of our heads, we're more, let's say, secure in exploring more things to raise awareness. So awareness raising has been through quite an evolution. It origins quite in antiquity with campaigns about religious currents or about a specific form of societal structure in ancient Greece, in Rome, in the theaters, the forums were used majorly to raise political awareness and to also coexist with forms of education, especially like the theater and the forums. But then in later times, we also see it particularly sprouting during Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, where we saw that there was a wider spread of printed media, such as books and pamphlets, and simultaneous promotion of literacy among the population. So we see that the spoken word and the written word are in the main focus of awareness raising. Choosing how we talk, how we write, how we speak about something is very, very important, and it has been so since the beginning of the very notion of awareness raising. So let's get into a bit the 20th and 21st centuries, which is what I believe we have experienced. I don't believe we have someone from the 19th century without wanting to be ageist. But in hopes that this is us today, we've seen a very key word in that, and that is propaganda. And we really have to discuss how mass communication and propaganda in the world wars is of course in a sense related to awareness raising in a sense, because of the professionalization of awareness raising, but for us it's really separates itself because it's based on invention and fake news as an opinion forming a tool, which we really, with consumers and citizenship education, we want to steer away. So we have in our centuries, public relations becoming an actual profession. We see in our organizations as well, we have people working on communications, we have people dedicated in, forming consciousness and escaping, the world of propaganda when that's possible. To do that, to help us in actually steering away from ways and practices that we don't want to follow, we follow in this module 5 main theoretical approaches around awareness raising, and that's social cognitive theory, theory of planned behavior, elimination likelihood model, social marketing, and critical pedagogy. And for critical pedagogy, you will see this nice little graph on the right. We're talking about the circle of theory to action to reflection to then revisiting theory, and all of that leading to praxis, meaning actual and tangible action. So in what we are providing you, as you saw, I did not go into much detail about the theories. We also have these steps to good awareness raising, from defining the cause to setting clear goals, to crafting your message and defining the target audiences, and from identifying your partners and allies. That is very, very important. And it's actually why we're here today, why all of us are here today, to defining a budget, because of course nothing in this world moves without money. Money makes the world go round. So that's also important that we have in mind in this point as well, in choosing the tool or set of tools that you want to use, and of course, setting a clear timeline for the action or campaign and define your milestones. I will leave you at that with what we've already done in hopes that you will visit our Moodle and you will learn more that way. I will let you know that we have examples of successful just transition initiatives where we mention their key awareness raising points. But most importantly, of course, you can find all of the resources, all of the good practices in our Moodle. There is a QR code here, but we will share it also in the chat, or I don't know, Hilby maybe has already shared it. I see him nodding, so yes, it's there. Yeah, as you can see, we have quite a lot of work in there for you. Of course, you can just follow one of the modules or all of them. You can play your mini games to get your certificate or not. It's really your choice, but we're really glad that we have you in. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to pass the floor to the lovely panel that we have. We have Raffaela Kihrer, the Secretary General of EAEA, the European Association for the Education of Adults, which I'm also part of. I constantly forget to introduce myself in these things after the third webinar, I believe. Hello, everybody. I'm Angeliki Giannakopoulou, and I am a Policy and Projects Coordinator at the EAEA. So then followed up by Stefan Grasgruber-Kerl. I hope I did not butcher this. My Germanic languages are really not my stronghold. Lovely, good to see that it was okay. Head of Campaigning and Advocacy at Südwind Association for Development Policy and Global Justice. And we have Carla Dassonville, Just Transition Officer at Solidar, our co-partner and coordinator actually of the Just4All project. So with that, I will stop sharing in hopes that I will see everybody now. So yes, welcome, and I hope that wasn't too much. Okay, everybody feels still up to par? Yes, good. That's nice. I cannot see many of our audience having their cameras on, but hopefully everybody has survived the PowerPoint. So, so with that, I will go on into giving you a bit of a bio, a bit of a history of who these people are, other than their official, roles and titles, and get to see a bit why they're here with us today. So I am going to start with Raf. We will then go to Stefan, and we'll finish with lovely Clara. So Raf is currently our new Secretary General at the EAA as of January 2025, but she used to be our head of policy, and that's, I think, very, very important as a context on why she's here today. She's also the elected Secretary General of the European Platform for Lifelong Learning, the Lifelong Learning Platform, which brings together all educational sectors at the European level, and it's central point of contact between European civil society and the European institutions. She has a background in international development studies and is also a trained teacher in secondary and adult education. She's very passionate about learning. She seizes every opportunity to visit adult education initiatives, especially at the grassroots level, and to reflect on what is needed to enable even more adults to benefit from it and to make it more democratic and empowering. A very good fit for this webinar, if I might say so myself. So with that, Raf, I will give you the floor, and I will give you the floor with a question to introduce a little bit yourself, but also your approach today. So we would like, from your experience with adult education, both policy and practice, to let us know, how do you see targeted campaigns and awareness raising initiatives go hand in hand with educational initiatives to promote the just transition, but also other topics that you might have in mind. And if you have any examples, you're free to share them. So yeah, welcome, Raf.
Thanks so much for the introduction. You started with a very complex question, but I would like to start by saying that whatever we do in terms of awareness raising, educational initiatives, and so on, they need to connect to the interests of people, to their needs, and also concerns that they might have. And this is also probably one of the key issues that we have as a European association, but also, of course, organizations working at the national and regional levels to identify these concerns and also interests, because whenever you start an awareness raising campaign, you basically want to raise awareness of an issue that people might not be aware of yet. I mean, this is a bit the entire sense of that activity. So you need to understand where people are and what they might need. Perhaps things that they don't identify as such, I mean, with a keyword or a clear concept, but still, yeah, it means a lot of talking to people, to educators, to learners themselves, of course, understanding where they are and issues that they are facing, so that you can connect your awareness raising activities to those needs. And yeah, I'd say when it comes to working at the European level, of course, we are quite removed from that grassroots level, or the level where people might actually express their concerns. I mean, of course, there's media that talks about all kinds of issues, but to really understand the complexity of issues, you need to talk to people. So this is why we try to visit adult education centers, community centers as much as possible, talk to people ourselves. But then, of course, as a membership organization, we have our members working at the national and regional levels who are in much closer contact with educators and learners, so they can also give us information of what's needed to make campaigns and educational initiatives that are impactful, that really connect to actual needs that people might have. And when it comes to examples, I find it quite difficult to just pick one or two examples that encompass all elements that we need to or want to see in successful campaigns. I mean, there are a lot of initiatives going on all around Europe and beyond, and all of them are very valuable. But perhaps I want to start with one example that's really an initiative that happened at the grassroots level. It was called Andar na Rua. Sorry for my terrible Portuguese. I know that it's pronounced very differently. It basically means walking the streets. And it was an initiative that was started during the economic crisis, well, the last one, not the current one, in Portugal, around 2010. Where a lot of people found themselves in unemployment, also long-term unemployment. There was quite a lot of hopelessness also among people, because there were just no perspectives for them to find work. And a lot of people found themselves in a situation of social isolation, basically. And yeah, just sitting at home, despairing a bit, or just not having any purpose because of that very dire general situation. And two educators then had the idea just to start a sort of walking club or city visits, city walks, where they invited people to meet at a certain place every Wednesday evening, and with the idea to just go to important places in the city, spaces with, for instance, historical meaning, or other kinds of meanings, just places for exchange, cultural spaces, and so on. And people walked there, and it became a very successful initiative in the sense of that more and more people joined this, these walks that happened every Wednesday evening, and there was no clear educational program behind it. It was just very informal, but it helped people to connect to each other, to get outside of their houses, to meet people from very different walks of life as well, and this also sparked a lot of conversations on all kinds of issues, like concerning the city, well-being, how people interact with each other, how they can make spaces safer, cleaner, and so on. And from there, groups of people then also decided to work on different kinds of initiatives and projects. So from my perspective, that this is a very good example of a successful grassroots initiative. I get a very low threshold level, but awareness raising by bringing people together and making them talk to each other simply. And very often this is just what's needed to get an initiative going. And just to give you another example from a more top-down level, I'd say these are the adult education festivals or lifelong learning festivals that we have all around Europe, that are usually organized by bigger adult education organizations. I think I saw someone also in the audience from a Dutch organization that organized or has organized these lifelong learning festivals. And they usually they organize taster courses where people can see a bit what's going on in adult education, which kinds of programs there are. They get information on, for instance, upcycling, recycling, or social action, these kinds of initiatives. And from there, people can also then move into further initiatives and actions. So this is more at a different level, but also very valuable to get information across and bring people together. And I leave it at this.
Lovely. I see in the chat that Antas has one coming soon. Thank you, Lorraine. Of course, that may mention as well that in our material and what we have shared, you can also find some background papers from our affiliated entities in the partnership, coming from Ireland and Antas, Cyprus, and Cardet, France from La Ligue de l'Enseignement, and from Sweden and the ABF. So you will find other good examples there as well. But thank you, Raf. I think that what's very important that we keep is that raising awareness is also raising people, and also getting people together. We cannot talk about it like one very simple way that we get the message out, and if they got it, they got it. Like it never works like that. And if it was, it would be, either propaganda or something that's seriously problematic. So I think it's very, very important that we also mention that, and also support even the initiatives that can be more top down, in a sense that adult education organizations organize them. But if we support the actions of adult education organizations, then we also support the awareness raising about the joy of adult learning and the power of adult learning. So it's very important to not forget about the meaning behind those initiatives as well. So thank you very much for mentioning that. I will go now. We'll jump in to Stefan now with a bit of a bio as well, so that we get to meet him and set the tone a bit for his contribution. So Stefan holds a master's in political science and international development, and has been working at the Südwind Association for Development Policy and Global Justice since 2000. Since it's 2000, right? It feels wrong not having number after it. So since the 2000s, and in the fields particularly of campaigning and advocacy, as the head of campaigning and advocacy since 2005. From 2003 to 2005, he coordinated the Clean Clothes campaign for fair working conditions in the global garment industry. And from 2006 to 2007, he was the coordinator of the Austrian EU Platform of Development NGOs. So since his work as a head of the department for campaigning and advocacy, he has been coordinating various EU projects on global supply chains, SDGs, as well as migration and development. And from 2017 to 2024, he was co-chairing the Concord GC working group. And today he will be expanding a bit on his work with the DEAR project that we're very, very glad to hear about. So welcome, Stefan. Very, very happy to have you here. And we want you to give us an idea of how it is to be a campaigner and an activist, more on the grassroots level, as we have discussed already, and what strategies have you found most effective? How do you work with the concept of the just transition for it to be more engaging?
Yeah, thank you very much, Angeliki, and thanks everybody for participating. And I'm very glad and very thankful for the invitation also to this great project, Just for All. We are sharing, and I will share with you a bit the experience we have in Clean Clothes campaign, and now especially in the DEAR project, Development Education Awareness Raising project, also funded by the EU, called Fashioning a Just Transition. That is exactly about just transition in the garment industry. And maybe before I come to your very valuable question, Angeliki, I will just give a short overview because of the topic itself, because most of us might think, when we start thinking about the just transition, about coal and coal miners, and the coal miners need to find new jobs, which was the general idea about the just transition, and the coal miners need to go into renewable energy. They need other education for that, and so on. But why do we need to talk about the fashion industry? We do need to talk about it because it is nearly as problematic as coal, to be honest. The textiles, clothing, leather, and footwear are among the most polluting and unjust industries, built on the widespread exploitation of cheap labor and also of the planet's resources. So when you look at waste, for example, it's a big environmental issue, but when you look on exploitation of workers, it's a big social issue. So the garment industry is the second biggest consumer of water and is responsible for 10% of global carbon emissions, which is really huge, more than all international flights and shipping combined, both cargo and person shipping. And also 92 million tons of garment waste are produced each year, which is nearly 100 million tons, and really a crazy track record. And this is also because in the last years and decades, the fashion industry became faster and faster. We have seen the so-called fast fashion with companies like Zara and the like coming up with new collections every 6 weeks. But we are now in the phase of the ultra fast fashion industry, as we call it. And this is governed by Shein and Temu and those big online brands, mostly coming from China, or actually being administered in China. Actually, the garments are still coming from Bangladesh. So with these changes, we see again more fast fashion, more waste produced. And that's why, before coming to your question, I think, what are we really advocating for, and what are we campaigning for, raising awareness for? is really a complex big thing where we also need to break down when we work with people to make it less complex, and also to not just start with the you need to change your behavior thing, because of course our behavior change is needed. Everybody needs to change behavior. We need to make more conscious decisions when we buy clothes or shoes. We need to consume less and better products, and we need to share more, swap more clothes. All of that is needed. That's one paradigm shift, but at least at the same importance, or even more important, is the better regulation. So we do advocate for better regulations, both on or actually triple on national, EU and UN levels. We did and are still advocating a lot and campaigning a lot for the CSDDD, this Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive from the European Commission, but also on the ban for forced labor, that is also effective as a European Commission kind of law. And also we are campaigning for better labor laws and minimum standards in the countries of production, because all of that is needed. But again, not only better regulation and conscious behavior will help. Also, we will need a democratization of companies and ownership. We will need more worker organizing in trade unions. We will need more workers and shareholders co-deciding on company decisions. And we will need more social and solidarity companies. We will need more co-ownership companies compared to what we have now, which is huge conglomerates and oligarch structures. So coming now to your question of campaigning, and really I love, Angeliki, how you put it. Raising awareness is about raising people, because this is exactly where we start, and that's why we also always combine with educational approaches, because of course you can do campaigning by just putting up posters on the streets or spending a lot of money on again the big social media companies, but that's not what we like to do. But really start from where the people are, from engaging young people. But in this case, we do engage young people on the one side and engage workers on the other side of the supply chain. We have, as you were mentioning, critical pedagogy in your introduction, and of course we're building a lot on that, and also of course on global citizenship education, which is our main educational principle in Südwind. But both of those concepts are actually coming from, of course, 1968 movements and from Paulo Freire, who wrote this great book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where he basically said the pedagogy to end oppression must be forged with, not for, the oppressed. And that's exactly the point, what we do, to get away from we teach something, to get to a learning approach also for us as an organization. And when we go into a discussion with young people, we do know that we all learn in dialogue from each other. And that's why also in this project we work from the bottom up. We start to work with the workers and the trade unions on the just transition in the producing countries. That means in Bangladesh, in China as much as possible, and in a number of other countries like Pakistan, Tunisia, but also we are talking about when talking production countries of garments, we are also talking about European countries. You mentioned Portugal, which is one of those producing countries, but also Bulgaria, Romania, of course, and a number of others. So we work with them because the just transition needed will mean at the end of the day less jobs for them, but also it will mean better jobs for them, and more sustainable jobs, and more qualitative garments for us. And this is the way we need to go. But we cannot go this way against the unions and against the garment workers. But we need to go this way with them and take them with us on the way, and also with them together generate the solutions. And this is also what we do in on the European side of things, on our end of the supply chain, which is engaging youth and young adults from their experience. So whenever we go in a workshop in a school or in a youth center, those young people know that the garment industry is not sustainable. They have at least a feeling for that already. They know that buying a T-shirt for €3, somebody has to pay the price, and they know it cannot be sustainable. Or ordering from Shein every week a new package cannot be sustainable. So we engage them in thinking from their experience, from where they stand, from their thoughts and ideas, how to change and make things better, how they can imagine that. And that's why we start with a lot of those workshops with young people, and then also start with them collecting ideas for change and collecting issues for change. And we do the same in the Global South, as explained. And in this bottom-up process, we bring together those young people and those workers by, of course, their ideas and solutions and asks, but also in reality, in physical formats. We bring them together. We will have a Youth Meets Workers forum and a number of other workshops where they meet both online and offline. And maybe that's interesting about a campaigning project. For 1.5 years, we do that. We just discuss, we take it from where the people stand on both sides of the supply chain, and we let them develop a manifesto together. And only on the 1st of May, of course, 1st of May, Labor Day, 2026, we will present the manifesto. So we don't know now, or when we started the project last year, we don't know now what the solution will be, what our asks will be. We have some ideas, of course, like everybody has, but we really take the time with workers and with young people and with unions and young people's organizations to sit together and develop this manifesto for just transition in the garment industry. And only then we go again with them to advocacy. So then we will, of course, come to Brussels, and also happy with Just4All people, have roundtable in the parliament, go to Geneva to the Human Rights Council of the UN, and to all those places. Of course, we need to go. We need to do the advocacy. There will be petitions and campaigns, but it will all start later, because we do believe that we really need to start from the bottom up, with a bottom up process, and really need to engage the young consumers and the workers on both sides of the supply chain. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. I think there are many topics that definitely we will need to discuss later on. But especially, I touch on the fact that awareness raising cannot be, like targeted only one way. And I think that's a mistake sometimes that we do. We over specify the target group, and this is not possible because the society is not organized in very set groups. I mean, bringing together everybody will be the only way forward to understand that we are truly one people, and with that we bring power with us. So it's very, very important to see that. I see a question on the chat. So Stefan, this is wonderful work. Might I ask, how do you overcome the fears that employees may have around their jobs? Any issues they may feel around employer relations? I think that maybe we can answer that now, if that's okay with you, and then we go on just to close the circle. What do you think, Stefan?
Well, yes, I can try, but of course this is, yeah, that's the worst fear, and that's a fear that you cannot overcome. You can just tackle it by addressing it openly, again, it's not us doing that or telling them you now have to overcome your fear, but it's the local unions. It's the local unions in Bangladesh and in other producing countries that work with the workers on the possibilities, and the thing is, maybe I expanded a lot about the consumers, but not so much about the workers. But also the workers know that their work is not sustainable. They know they work too long hours. They know they are exploited because they are paid by piece rate and so on. So they also want a better job and less hours, but better work. And we try to address it through the unions from there, because of course also the interest of the unions and of the workers is to improve the working conditions, and not just raise the hours like endless. They are already at 60 hours a week in most of the producing countries. So anyway, they also want to bring down their working hours, and the just transition is a way to do that, and also to raise the payment, which is also in the interest of the workers. But of course, it's never easy, and you need to tackle it openly in an open process with the unions that are in the daily contact with the workers, and not us coming from the global north and trying to do that.
Lovely. Great. I think that we will have more of an opportunity to discuss further on that. I will say that during, I believe, our second webinar on social innovation and the just transition, we also explored the concept of degrowth. And in that, we also discussed about the facts that to go forth, we have to, things will be lost, but then regained, and in much better conditions. And at the end of the day, that's wistful for everybody in making their lives better. I will go on now to Clara before getting to the official Q&A. Last but definitely not least, with an amazing work that I've actually been very glad to work with Clara at the Alliance for the Just Transition. So welcome, Clara. So Clara is a Just Transition Policy Officer at Solidar, and in her role, she contributes to Solidar work on climate and social issues, supports advocacy and campaigning activities, and empowers a network of progressive policymakers, social partners, and civil society organizations through the work of the European Alliance for the Just Transition, and not only. She previously worked for the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, the Green European Foundation, and the Council of the European Union. And she was educated at the College of Europe in Poland and the Sorbonne in France. So very, very happy to have you here, Clara, and particularly to see how you focus on social justice and education and the just transition as an interlink of all, and to see how do you see these elements intersect with the just transition, and how do you create campaigns that resonate with that. So happy to hear from you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, everyone. It's really, really nice to see you. I was following the MOOCs webinar, the first one, so it's really nice to be here today and to be part of the conversation, and especially after brilliant speakers. So interesting to hear the different perspectives and how do we conjugate social justice with just transition in education and many other fields. So I'm going to bring the Solidar perspective, and this webinar is really spot on for me because I work on just transition as policy officer at Solidar, but I also dedicate 30% of my time to communications. So I really had the pleasure to see how the two interlinks and how mutually reinforcing they both are. And as Angeliki was mentioning, we also run the European Alliance for Just Transition, which I encourage all of you to check out because it's a really nice alliance of more than 50 members that gather civil society organizations to political parties to trade unions that work at the European level on this topic. So if you're curious, I'm happy to share a few resources after that. And so before sharing our work at Solidar and how do we engage citizens and organizations on the topic, I'd first give you a very brief overview of why does communication matter so much. In my opinion, it's an essential but often overlooked side of policymaking. Too often, we treat communication as an afterthought when it comes to projects, when it should really be an integral part of it. But there are many different challenges linked to this. The first one is the EU structural democratic deficit. We all know that the EU is often perceived by citizens as something that is very far away. It's often very complex to communicate around it in very simple terms. And so there's this structural imbalance of information when it comes to the EU and then to citizens, which often lead to disinformation and a lot of other fake news. But then the second hurdle is obviously climate communications. That is really not easy because climate change is such a difficult and long-term phenomenon. It's often very difficult to see and highlight the very concrete aspects of it to citizens in very simple terms. And also a doomsday narrative, having a very catastrophic oriented communications often doesn't help to trigger action to citizens. Quite the opposite, it often triggers despair. So this is also very difficult. And then another layer of difficulty that we see in the post-truth era is that the media context isn't always favorable to progressive civil society and progressive messages. We're seeing an increased polarization of the communication sphere. When it comes to different social media network, we're seeing that it's really not transparent and it actually increases the information bubble instead of creating a very transparent and democratic public sphere. So all of these are very challenging elements that make it difficult to conduct campaigns for just transition. How do we tackle all of this at Solidar? So first of all, we like to put people and stories at the heart of our communications work. It's about bringing down the issue to the everyday struggle and the everyday life. Because we're often so caught up in the EU bubble, in the Brussels jargon, it's really hard for us to relate all of these policy initiatives and all of this very big, complex phenomenon to the everyday problem. And so in order not to feel disconnected, it's important to bring it to the everyday and to really put people and stories at the heart of everything. And so it's really about blending emotions with facts to create an impact and share stories that resonate with the everyday life of people. Second, it's important to get creative and to experiment with the different formats and platforms. Because our attention span is so short nowadays, it's really important to use as many visuals as we can, to use very interactive videos, GIFs, everything that might catch the eye and that might be new, in order to bypass the traditional sources of information that might seem outdated or too long or not very relevant for different audiences. It really keeps the message fresh and engaging if you try to experiment with new creative formats. Then, and I think the most important is to connect the dots between the different issues. And this is what we've seen in the approach of Just Transition that the EAEA, but also that Südwind has. It's that Just Transition, it's not only about energy policy and the coal workers in Poland, it's about our education system in Spain, it's about energy communities in Croatia, it's about the windmill, but also so many other social issues that are happening in Ireland and Sweden all around the world. So it's really important that when we choose stories that focus on people, we connect the dots between the different issues, because it's not only about climate, it's about really system change overall. And so that's why it's important to really highlight that all of this is mutually reinforcing. So let me give you one example that I'm really proud of. Last year, it was the EU elections. So obviously we ran a lot of different raising awareness campaign at the Solidar team. And here we decided to run a raise awareness campaign focused on issues that we think related to people the most. It was mostly focused on migration, on energy prices, and on public transport. And the theme was really to put people at the center. And the hashtag was grab the mic, in the sense that you have a voice and you can use the space to spread your message. And so we just took people, friends that we thought had an interesting story to share. And we just created 30 seconds video in the vertical and a horizontal format so that it could be spread on different platforms, where they would just explain how do they relate to this issue and how it's connected to the European elections. We chose this topic because we thought that at the time, topics like energy poverty or public transport really connect the dots really well between very high energy prices, the need to have the energy transition, and the need for more social justice and democratic energy systems. So we thought that that was the concern at the heart of Citizen, and that's why we chose this topic. And so we had 8 short videos spread around 13 different posts. And in total, we gained around 10,000 views and more than 50 reposts from member organizations. And so what did we learn from it? I think the format worked really well. And really, the biggest takeaway that we had is that we're more powerful when we're together. To the sense that what made our content so successful and why did we have so many views, it's because we coordinated with our member organizations and with our partners so that we will all post the different videos and all post the different content at the same time, in the same time period and at the same hour of the day. So really building this critical mass for Just Transition really makes an impact because everyone has a role to play and everyone has a different take on Just Transition. So the EAEA might focus more on education, Südwind and the project might focus more on fashion. At Solidar, we focus more on social justice, but coordinating efforts and harmonizing on different messages, as we're doing through this MOOC, really helps to amplify the different messages and to spread it on different platforms. And as I was saying, once again, usually in terms of how we build awareness, it's about triggering individual responsibility, making the structural inequalities appear to the different individuals and making them feel that they're part of a community that can trigger change for the best. And I think this is the point of raising awareness campaign, and that's why adopting a very catastrophic or negative tone doesn't work that much because it inspires much despair than anything. And also that nowadays, facts, unfortunately, don't matter so much anymore. It's really about emotions and stories. So if we can combine all of this for our advantage, I think we can really build consensus for Just Transition, spread the different messages, and mobilize every actor on every single scale. Thank you so much. And I'm very happy to answer questions and continue the discussion.
Lovely. That's really great, and a lot of very important elements of why we do communications work, because I think that a lot of times it's something like a back thought or an afterthought in one sense that, oh, we're really looking at the content. But yes, why do we produce that content? Who do we reach? Who do we get the input and the insight for said content? And that's done through our campaigning, our communications. And what I really find key in these kinds of campaigns is also, how do we make people, maybe that's a question also for everybody in the panel, how do we make people want to be associated with this particular context and a particular organization, a particular campaign? Because I do believe that it's very important that we have actual people's faces and actual people's words, but it's very difficult sometimes to get the trust of people to get behind, someone that is already structured. And I know that in terms like of own, activist work, you're always very, very, you have to be very careful of who you are associating yourself with. So it would be very interesting to hear what's your experience with that.
If I may, yeah, thank you so much, Angeliki. Very good summary of the intervention. On your point on how do we get people to move, I think this is really the asset of civil society organizations because there's such a general distrust against mainstream and traditional institutions. It's often really hard for people to believe them and put their trust in them. And this is why civil society organizations, we have every role to play to be the bridge between these more European global issues and at the citizen and local level to really foster trust of the citizen because we're a smaller structure, because we have such these direct conversations with citizens. I think we're the best equipped to build this trust in different ideas and processes.
Great. Lovely. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on that. If not, please, and if yes as well, if anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat or raise your hand and ask it. I think that's lovely. Oh, lovely, Hilmi. Kindly reminds you that if you have any questions, you can now either click the raise hand button to ask it or type it in the chat. Thank you, Hilmi. You're a wonder. So let's see if anyone wants to ask anything. Yes.
Could I perhaps add something to what Clara just said? I really like very much that you emphasized this point on storytelling and how important it is to tell the right stories, because this is how it makes it approachable, like any topic that we are talking of. Then it really speaks to people. But what I still would like to add is that we still struggle with the issue that very often people are already very much in their echo chambers of opinions and ideas and concepts. And I mean, we could see that so well now with the development of Twitter versus or X and other social media, where a lot of communication happens increasingly in these echo chambers, where there is no space for interaction anymore with people who might have a different opinion. So what I believe is that this is one of the strengths perhaps of adult learning, that it's broader than only focusing on certain topics or themes like social justice and so on. And while it's of course very much there in the background or in the foreground as you want, but you can do a lot of things in adult learning. Very often people might just attend a class because they need to for work or because they want to learn a language or something else. But through that way, they also get in touch with people who have different ideas, opinions, and so on. And it might also create opportunities for well, adult learning to show that there are classes, that there are educational activities that focus specifically on, for instance, social justice, climate change, and so on. So very often you just need to find an entry point to get people into different kinds of situations, surroundings, and then from there you can create that awareness. It's just that, I think more needs to be done when it comes to that outreach work and those low threshold learning offers that get people into learning in the first place, so that they also get access to other kinds of information and to that general discourse that enables people to gain that understanding. And I think also there's this other element of individual responsibility versus collective action, or collective learning, because as an individual you can get information, but if you want to have deep understanding of an issue, you need the collective. You need to exchange with other people. You need to engage perhaps also in social action to get that deep understanding of backgrounds of issues and the wider context that we are talking about. And as you said, that climate change, for instance, or like windmills or whatever, are not an isolated issue, but they are just embedded in a very wide context of issues. And yeah, I guess at the end of the day, it's about creating that discourse, critical thinking, and engaging people in action that can lead to impact for everyone, not only at the individual level.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you, Raf. And especially on the point that we need to touch different opinions, because indeed we tend to be again and again in our own like echo chambers. And before I go to the next questions, what I was reminded was an example that I actually lived and I was not expecting. When I was an adult educator in Greece, we did a course on fake news and misinformation. And we decided to, not call it like battle disinformation or against or fake news or whatever. We made the messaging super simple to get everybody from our community, because we were in the center of the city, and we had an open day of discussion on fake news. And it was quite interesting to see that we really got very different people. We got a lot of people that were perceiving, for example, climate change as fake news, and we actually saw people that supported conspiracy theories, and they just said that it's not conspiracy, it's that they want us to believe that it's conspiracy. So it was very interesting to see that for several points, when we actually are open to the full community and in the ground, we have the opportunity to get very, very many different insights and actually build a dialogue with people that are not from our very particular echo chamber. So it's very, very, very important to see what's the role of adult learning and education in that, because these spaces actually invite, for different reasons, so many different people, especially when they provide basic literacy education, which is like a very key element, a key practice of ALE. I will pass the floor to Hilmi, that has his hand raised. So Hilmi, take it along.
Thank you very much, Angeliki, and thank you all for this amazing discussions. Really, really wonderful. And it's great that Raffaela just mentioned individual versus collective, because my question is, I have two questions, one for Stefan and one for Clara. My question to Stefan is, you mentioned about fast fashion, and I agree with your intervention, but I was wondering, what are some practical steps that individuals can take in their daily lives to combat fast fashion and also can make more sustainable choices? And for Clara, I agree, communication is very important. So my question is more on the likes and the viewers that your communication gets. What does that mean? And how important it is to have, many likes or many viewers, and how should we interpret this into our work? And thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Hilmi. So, Stefan, any examples, anything that you've seen from your research and workshops?
Well, yes, of course. So on the individual level, thanks for the question. Of course, there are a few things that you can do, which is just consume less and just consume less fast fashion, which means on the other side, consume more fair and ecological, meaning, of course, there are ecological clothes, there are more fair produced clothes. It's not easy to find those, but there are like the Global Organic Textile seal, and a number of others, also the European seal. There are possibilities to get less bad textiles, at least. And the other most important point is also to keep what you have. Like Fairphone always says the fairest phone is the one you already have. So that's the same for clothing. Huh? It's much better than finding fair and ecological clothes. Just keep the ones you have and use them longer. Repair those. That also goes for shoes, of course, that sometimes are even better repairable. And also when you want to get rid of those, maybe someone else wants to have it. So we do organize a lot of, also for awareness raising purposes, a lot of garment clothes swapping parties where people just come, bring their clothes they don't want anymore and get others. And by that we make some awareness raising and some introduction on what is needed above the individual level, which is exactly the better regulation, which is exactly supply chain laws like the supply chain directive and so on. So those are the points where we then come in also with our ideas to bring it to the political level and to the systemic level, because of course we all know we cannot change it just on the individual level, but there are a lot of ways to start on the individual level, and that's for us also important, always in awareness raising and education, as an example. The individual level is always an example, even if it doesn't change the world from one day to the other. It's an important example that there are ways to make it more sustainable, also individually.
Lovely. Thank you, Stefan. And I think that this is a very relevant question, especially when we talk about the just transition. Where is the justice in all of this? Because we know that it's much more, possible that a person that buys from Shein or from Temu is of a lower class, most probably, because it's it's not always, because now there are all these videos on TikTok, for example, that people buy in bulk to just sell, even more and more and more. But it is something that we have been discussing with a lot of learners on the topic. For example, people that cannot find their size easily in other cases, and this is the only way to find like a bigger size, or people that do not have the money at a specific point, or people that feel that it's in this bubble of not having time because you overwork all day, and the only way that you will find a bit of serotonin is to buy a little top. And there are all these things that very well intrinsic to the capitalist experience, that you consume to be happy, you consume to be well put in society, to get a better job, or to do whatever that is. So I completely agree that the first point is, how do we learn to consume less, and then get to the point as an economy and as a society to go towards more fair practices. And then Clara, I don't know, do you need Helmi to?
No, I have it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much also for your answers, Stefan, and how you complemented Angeliki. Indeed, it's totally about rethinking the different systems, but also about having access to alternatives, right? Because as you say, if you need a certain pair of shoe and the only cheap available and delivered the next day or even the next hour is available online, but then when you have other alternatives like Vinted, the secondhand marketplace, then it becomes easier. But then you also have the rebound effect, it's called, where since it's secondhand, then you tend to consume just as much or even more because it's secondhand. So indeed, we have this first capitalist system, but also human instincts that are very hard to tame. But it's a fascinating discussion, and it's really nice to see the progress that we've done over the past years on this topic. But now to Hilmi's question, and thank you so much, related to how do we measure influence and change? Basically, what do all of these numbers mean? It's always a very tricky one. How do we measure and how do we quantify system change? How do we measure and quantify the achievements that we've done? There's so many different ways to do it, and all of them are to take with a pinch of salt, because it's not an absolute science, and social media metrics are one of them. So indeed, when we measure influence in terms of reach, impressions, likes, shares, etc. on our communications platform, for us, it's just about seeing if our objectives and audience were reached. Meaning we produced this campaign to reach this type of people, and we had this number of views or shares that we wanted to reach. Is it done or not? And these are the point of having these numbers. In our case, we want to reach policymakers and EU bubble, and our social media communication tend to go in that direction. When we see the number of shares, it's mostly partners, people working at European level, people that work with at the Commission, at the Parliament, at the Council. So in this sense, this is reached, but there are many other ways to measure influence. It can be how many people were at our events, how many meetings we had with policymakers, or did I make someone change their minds about climate change, or did I make a friend that actually accepted my views? You know, there are so many different types of ways, and all of them are to take with a pinch of salt because even our numbers, for instance, most of the traffic on the internet is bots. So when we measure the numbers of people that enter our website, we see a lot of numbers from China and the US. Obviously, this is very unrealistic. We don't have members in neither of these countries. There are also VPNs that are used where people can just change their IP address to a certain place. So all of this is obviously very approximative. It's helpful for us to measure our influence and our objectives in a very specific communications objective. But obviously, this has to be reflected on the overall different activities that we have because we do communications, but we also do a lot of policy and advocacy, and their influence and impact can be measured in many other ways. And if I can come back also to the EU election campaign that we had, I think in our case, for instance, we wanted to reach citizens, but citizens is such a broad audience that you really have to specify who are citizens. I am a very different citizen than my neighbor that lives downstairs and or from someone that is crossing the street right now. So we really have to be more specific when we say that we want to reach citizens. And in the case of our EU election campaign, for instance, we mostly reached similar networks working in English at the EU level because it's really hard to break through the language barrier of the different member states. So we reached the umbrella organizations, mostly working in English at the international context. And this is something that we're very happy about. But obviously, if you want to reach actual citizens, you have to come to have national campaigns, obviously. And you can bridge this by creating toolkits that different members can translate, for instance. But it's always a lot of coordination and work. So yeah, measuring influence metrics are always interesting to see if we reach our objectives, but they can also be tricky because it's not the only way. They're not often very reliable. And change is such a broad question that having just one metric on how many shares we had, obviously, it's never going to be enough to change systemically things. I hope this clarifies, and I'm happy to complement if anything.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Clara. And with that, maybe because you also mentioned the collective and Raffaela previously mentioned the collective, where do you see, all of you, that goes to everybody, where do you see then awareness raising in bridging this gap between individual action and individual initiative and collective action? Do you see maybe like a meta awareness raising, meaning that not raising awareness only on the topic, but raising awareness also on the fact that individual initiative and collective action should work together? Is that part of an awareness raising campaign or not?
If you want, I can start, and then Stefan and Raffaela feel free to complement. And it's something that Stefan hinted at the beginning, adopting a very moralizing communications tone is often not the way to go. Bringing all of the responsibility on the individual when most of the consequences, I'm speaking of climate change, but it applies to many other issues, are due to systemic factors and much bigger players, never works because you either feel powerless or you feel enraged in a way. You're like, how can this be my fault? I'm recycling and I'm doing everything that I can, but then you have big fossil fuel companies just drilling oil in different countries. So how am I connected to all of this? So I think the tone to approach is one that is a bit shows the connection between individual actions and system change, meaning your choice contribute to a bigger picture. All of these choices do not happen in a vacuum. It's part to a system. The fact that you're paying more for your energy bills and that you have to put up the heating and so that it becomes more expensive, it's because we're locked into a fossil fuel industry where we mostly depend on unreliable actors to provide us for the different fuels. So showing how each individual action is linked to a broader political context in a tone that is not so patronizing and moralizing, but more as your action can make a difference, and together we can make a difference, and you can trust us, civil society, to bring your voice to the level that matters. So really highlighting the structural inequalities and barriers to individual change, calling for action beyond this. So obviously, we all need to have affordable energy bills, but on the long run, we should also have access to sustainable energy systems that are also cheap, especially for the most vulnerable, and then collaborate across the different levels. And this is how we can work together at the local level, at the regional level, and at the European level. And I think if individuals see that they can make a difference and that together there can be a better future, this usually is the sign for people to take action. And it can be as simple as sharing a story on Instagram, to joining a protest, to sharing an information raising campaign, to raising the topic during dinner, to donating to a different organization. So there's often, it's a domino effect and it often trickles down, but it all starts with your voice matters. These are the structural issues. This is how it impacts you. And this is what you can do and which actors you can work with if you want to make a difference. If you want to compliment Raffaela or Stefan, I'm very happy to hear also your point of view.
Yes, if I may, Clara, I think that was already very, very clear and already gave us a great ideas how to solve it, because it is really always about this connection between individual and systemic change. And maybe if I come back to your point, Angeliki, about lower classes ordering a chain. Yes, that's the case partly, but partly it's also others. And we also looked at the luxury brands in our campaigns. And you don't have to watch The House of Gucci on Netflix, but you can, to see that this is a crazy société anonyme now, as they call it in French. So a huge company just working for a few shareholders' profit, that is not at all producing quality anymore. And the same you can tell about all the other high street brands. That even the exploitative working conditions are sometimes the same. So this is really the crazy situation. We are in a neoliberalist and capitalist society, and a system that values exploitation and that values unsustainable solutions much more than any other. And that's why we always try to, as also Clara put it, also make this link to the systemic, that you need to change the system. You need to change the EU in the end, and we need to keep the best principles of the EU, like the Green Deal and so on, even when circumstances change. And I think this is now the biggest challenge we have, that we are having not only extreme right governments all over Europe, but also more and more politicians and governments neglecting climate change and neglecting sensible behavior. And there, I think we need to be the voice of reason, not only on the individual level, but also on the systemic level, and always clearly demand systemic solutions as well.
Really great. Raf, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think when it comes to adult education or the connection to it, it's really about creating these safe and inclusive spaces for debate, where there is no judgment, where people can express their opinions freely, and where they interact in a way that they create a common understanding, common meaning as well. And I guess this is a lot about learning and unlearning at the same time. It's about unlearning a lot of the misconceptions that we might have about phenomenons around the world, or concepts. It's also very much about searching the values that we want to promote. And for me, I mean, now I'm probably becoming a bit political if I say that, but at the end of the day, it's also about the question of, do we want to improve something that's failing, or do we want to actually act for something new, something that's better for everybody, and that brings people together in a way that creates this kind of action that leads to a radical change, and not only like, yeah, turning the screws here and there and trying to improve something that's not working. That's just my idea.
Love the disruptive notes, because at the end of the day, we need to be disruptive at several points. It's not feasible any other way. And in this disruption is sometimes like, recognizing where we stand in all of this and what's our kind of role, and in our campaigning and in our awareness raising. Are we afraid? And if we are afraid, then can we imagine the people that are already in contexts of much bigger systemic exclusions than us in any case in the global north at this point, and in this context that we're talking about. So it's very important to, I think, for me to also see that, because I opened a bit the Pandora's box of the classism in all of what we discuss, which is a very grave issue, not only because of what happens in the upper class and the lower class, but also the mimetisms, the propaganda that affects the relationship of the classes and the retention of them, and how that affects a truly just transition and a truly just narrative in that transition. And this always has to do with maybe the very first point that Raffaela made about, like, awareness raising really goes in hand with the actual people and the engagement of the people, not us engaging them, they becoming engaged and staying engaged and being in this sphere. And hopefully this is where we can go forth. I'm afraid that exactly now, as I started saying the sentence, it is 11:30 in the Central European Time. So officially our webinar is over. I hope we had much more time. I've seen a lot of very, very nice and positive comments about all of the positions heard. We're very, very glad that we had you today with us. And I will say that in 1 week, we will have with you some additional material coming from our experts as presentations. We will also have the recording of this webinar, which we will then, in about 1 month, 1 month and a half, we will also have available subtitled in French, Greek, and Swedish, in addition to share with your contexts if you need to. So with that, thank you once again, and have a good day and a good week.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.